Welcome. This is Matt Wallace, and this is Music Quest. Glad to have you. If you happen to be, we actually have somebody online already, so I am thrilled with that. Let me introduce our interview today. Our guest, a guy that I've been excited to talk to for quite a while. It is John Mays, and there he is in all of his glory. How are you doing, John?
Great, Matt. Good to see you, man.
I am thrilled to be doing this. I told you that before. I'm going to tell you and the world this time. I've been wanting to do these interviews for a while, and you were always on that list that I thought would be super fun to do. Right off the bat.
I hope so.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty confident. I'm not confident about my part, but I think you are definitely a pro on multiple levels, and I think you've done plenty of podcasts. How many live ones have you done? Like
none that I can remember.
Well, there you go. We brought something new to the table for you.
Absolutely. It's fun.
Yeah, so we'll have people maybe ask some questions along the way in chat. This is on Twitch. Sure. And we get people from all over listening, asking, doing what they do on Twitch. Great. And I even fixed it so that you don't have to watch any inappropriate chat questions. I get to screen them before they get put up on screen, if they get put on screen.
Thank you. I think that's a thank you.
No, it's definitely a thank you. I mean, we don't have any of those kind of people. If I had lots and lots and lots of people in chat, then you'd have to worry about the trolls. But I have nice people in my chat. So, John, you are a music industry executive. You've been in the music industry for quite a while. I really don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about all the history because we have a short amount of time today, and I've got some questions I want to ask you. And so we may be missing some of the questions that the audience. Now, if the audience wants to ask them, we'll definitely get to them. But if you don't mind, just a short version of what you do in the industry and maybe how long you've been doing it. And let's just start with you doing that. Okay?
Yeah. Well, what I do is a function that every record label has called A&R. It stands for Artist and Repertoire. And basically, A&R people, those who do the job, are doing four things on any given day. This is very blocking and tackling description of the job. But A&R people are responsible for assigning new artists to the label. So you're looking to discover new artists and bring them onto your roster. You are looking for songs for those artists to record. So most of the artists we sign are going to be songwriters, but you're working with them, putting them together with co-writers, trying to edit songs, get the best of maybe they've written 60, 70 songs for this batch of music that you're going to record, and you're trying to get down to the best 8, 9, 10 songs with them. Third is that you're overseeing the process of production of the songs that you're going to release. So you're not producing per se, but you hire a producer and then oversee the production, which does include deadline and budget and stuff like that. So it's not all just creative work. And then we're responsible for maintaining the relationship with the artist. Usually most artists have some friendship relationship with everybody at the label. But since the relationship sort of starts with the A&R person, it's generally yours to manage. And when things go south with an artist, if they do, they're usually going to come to you to try to figure out what the next steps are to get things right again. So that's a very short version of what A&R does. I've been doing that job since 1987 for different labels here in town. And prior to that, I was a bass player, and that's what got me to Nashville. And I don't know if you're ever going to talk about this, Matt, but Matt and I are from the same hometown, Andrews, Texas. That's where I grew up, and still proud of it to this day.
Yes. So I was looking through some stuff, snooping around online, and I found a picture that I'm guessing you like a lot. And I liked it a lot. You ready to see what I picked out of of the stuff?
Oh
There you
no.
go. Check that out.
Oh, that's my wallpaper on my phone.
Yeah, that is a beautiful shot of West Texas and oil. You got to love that, right?
So, Matt, you remember, not that we have time to do this, but the old Commercial State Bank
Uh-huh.
downtown, which I
Uh-huh.
think is closed now, but I went in there with my sister. That's probably, I don't know, 15 years ago. And that is a picture that was hanging on the wall in the Commercial State Bank. So that's a picture of a picture that I took, and it just turned out great.
It looks great. I like
I
that picture
know.
a lot. It's beautiful, and that is what West Texas looks like, guys. Lots of
Makes me
sky,
homesick.
lots of no trees, lots of pump jacks. And when you go out there for the first time, if you've not been out there, a lot of people will be struck by a particular scent in the air, and I'm like, that's money, baby. That is money.
That is the smell of money in West Texas.
Yes, it is. Yes, we did grow up in Andrews, Texas. You were a few years ahead of me.
Okay.
However, you did, and I'm not looking for any dirt here, but I am going to point
That's fine.
out that my mom remembers you being in her class. And
Yeah,
if
she was my
I,
history teacher.
that's correct.
Yeah.
And years ago, when we first chatted for one of the very first times, I remember you telling me the thing you remembered about her class involves a little bit of pain. Am I remembering that correctly?
I don't remember now. It's
Did,
probably been so long since I told you that story.
did
Pain, like I
somebody
got
stabbed you with a
licks.
pencil or something?
Oh yes, Tommy Finley got me with a. He was sitting in the desk in front of me and jabbed my knee with a pencil, and I still have a mark to this day.
And that was in my mom's history class.
Indeed, that's what I
All
took
right.
away from the history
Well,
class.
I thought that was
Now,
an interesting memory.
actually, to this day, I love history, love it, and to whatever, uh, whatever whoever's your mom's fingerprints are probably on that somehow. That I left Andrews and love history so much.
Well, I am thrilled to share that history with you. I think it was a fantastic place to grow up.
Mm,
It was well financed by the taxes and the oil, so we had really really good facilities and teachers, and it was just a fantastic place to grow up. And no disparaging to people who live there now. I am thrilled to not live there. No, we're blessed to where we live, okay? And I'm assuming
yeah,
you like Nashville, or you wouldn't have stayed there so long. What year did you arrive in Nashville?
77.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you
So I
showed up as a
graduated high
bass player.
school.
Okay.
Graduated high school in 74. Moved from Andrews to Nacogdoches, Texas, across the state,
Okay.
and played for a little band out of Nacogdoches for a couple of years. And then we opened for a band that was out of Nashville. They happened to be auditioning bass players. And I moved on to Nashville to do that audition and ended up staying because I got the job.
So you did tour some, but you also started playing like a studio musician type thing for a while. Which did you do longer, the touring or the studio stuff?
Studio stuff. That was about a 5 year period. Well, I toured for probably 4 years. So they were close. But once you can work yourself up into making a living as a session player, you stay there for a while because it's hard work to get and awesome work to get to do.
Well, I have spent time in a couple of studios in Nashville over the years. My wife actually used to fly into town. I worked at American Airlines for a while, and she could
Oh,
fly into Nashville in the morning and record female demos and then fly home that evening. And she couldn't make any money because that was against regulations as far as the cheap tickets. But she
right.
had so much fun. She would fly in and she would do the female versions of people's demos and have a great time without me.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, but one of the things it's been a while since I've spent any real time in Nashville, but what as someone who's lived there for a while, it really kind of has a small town vibe to it, even though it's not a small town. I mean, it's like people know each other, right? There's like a lot of the scuttlebutt that you would expect to hear and feel and live in a small town. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I've always told people, like, if you can't live in Texas, Tennessee's a good second choice. I think the people are a lot the same. That sort of friendliness that you mentioned, that's here. And people who move here from New York or LA for the music scene, that's the first thing they'll talk about, is how they feel welcome. They feel like people build friendships quickly here as opposed to other big cities. And you're right. In some ways, Nashville is still a country town that's kind of grown bigger. Matt, if you haven't been here in a while, you'd probably be shocked at how the city's grown in the last decade. But still, even with its growth, you can be downtown Nashville and drive 20 minutes in just about any direction and kind of be out in the country. So I think that's what people love about it. It's not that hard to find green space and trees and cattle. And you were like, wasn't I just in a metropolitan area? And you were, but that's just the way the city's laid out.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely, I think the last time I was there was, my gosh, it's probably 12 years ago now. It's really sad
Wow.
to be getting old enough where 12 years ago seemed like yesterday, because it wasn't that long ago. But yeah, we were there on a trip with our kids. We were interviewing people in the industry, artists, engineers, producer types. We were on this like massive trip that went through Nashville. We actually just recorded in Memphis at Sun, and
How
and
fun.
then came to Nashville, then went up to Cincinnati, but the point of the trip is we spent 4 full days at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, and that's about how long it takes to go through it all. If you literally go through it, and my kids were both looking at getting into the industry, and that trip was amazing, and it included some time in Nashville because hey, got to go to Nashville. So
Well, good.
so studio musician touring. It seems to make sense to me that being able to sleep in your own bed, going into a nice clean place where people are there to specifically listen and record what you're doing would be different than touring. Anything about the touring that from way back in the day, I know it's been a few years, but anything from that you were just like, that was I really enjoyed that aspect of touring. Was there something like that you could share with us?
100%. And for what it's worth, I still accompany our artists out on tours all the time. I'll either go to just a date they're playing somewhere or get on the bus and do a couple of dates. So I still taste that sort of thing occasionally. But to answer your question, by far the best part, at least in my experience of touring, was the camaraderie, the brotherhood, because we were all guys. That happened when you're touring together like that. It's sort of like what I would imagine being in the service together. Like, you're not fighting an enemy, thank God, but you're bound together in this quest to, you want to be the best band out there, and you're always pushing each other. You're always encouraging each other when it's healthy. Even calling each other out. We used to have a practice in one of the bands I was in of recording every night, and one instrument or vocalist would be soloed in one channel while everything else was in the other. And, you get back on the bus and start listening to that. And if it was your night to be soloed, it's not fun, to listen to there and hear everything. But even in those nights, like, the encouragement that would come from the other guys in the band was always awesome. And I remember when I left, feeling a sense of loss about, I sort of lost my band of brothers with these guys. And in that particular band, I'm sure this is true in others. When I started with the band, there wasn't a lot going on. And just over the time that I was with them, they got signed and had some good things happen. And those are dreams, that you dream of when you're in a band. So getting to experience all that was by far the best part. Second would probably be that you see saw so many parts of the world, getting to tour, and of course every state in the U.S. And then we did some overseas trips and things like that that would have never happened had I not been in a little band, you know.
That is fantastic. I do believe that that kind of friendship has to be special. I won't go into that. I had an experience in the past that I had in my head. This has got to be kind of like it was, you know, in wartime. I'll tell you about it later some other time. But okay. Yeah, that's really cool. I am thrilled. I don't know if it was subliminal, intentional, whatever, but you used the word quest when you were talking a second ago. I think a lot of people don't think of their interest or pursuit of music as a quest. But that is, you know, the name of this thing is actually intended to be a little thought-provoking and informative beyond just a nifty name. Would you ever consider your pursuit of music some sort of a quest personally?
Oh, of course, yeah. Because, you know, you start with this, and I don't know if this would be true for your experience. Probably everybody's different, but I grew up in a little church out there in Andrews and was kind of the music kid at my church. And you dream, once you can even have the dream, you start dreaming of making a living somehow in music, you know, or just playing all the time. You'd rather, you know, play music than eat when you're 18, which actually ends up happening if you go on the quest. But because it's this dream is something you don't even know if it's attainable. Like if somebody would have told 18-year-old John that you'll make your living playing music one day, I would have laughed at him. It's hard to do. It's hard to get there, like any good quest. And you are going to be tested along the way. You know, there were so many moments that I would call home and like, I'm probably going to do this next section of whatever it would be, touring or whatever, and then just come on back home. I haven't eaten in a few days. I haven't slept in a real bed in a long time. The things that test your commitment to, not just to the band that you might currently be in, but more so just the idea of living a musician's life, living a creative life. It's going to cost you something. And there's dues that you should pay. And now in the role that I have now, where I bring on and start to work with younger artists, people in their 20s, 22, 23 years old, I can almost tell the difference just in a conversation with them of those who have what we call in the industry paid their dues and the ones that haven't. The ones that have a sort of a character about them that's like, I've worked so hard for this and I'm so grateful to be here. I don't want to squander any opportunity I have to either make music or listen to music, just to live a musician's life. So I think it compares lots of ways when you think about the classic quest of literature. There's usually a mentor, you know, that helps lead the way. And that was certainly the case for me. There were 2 or 3 men in my life that helped me with that. But at some level, you're going to pay a price for making the decision to do it. And it will test you as to whether or not maybe it's going to be music as a long-term choice that you make with your life, or time to jump off the ship and do something real. You know, there were several times in my quest that if I would have stopped where I was and gone back home, you know, the guys I had graduated high school with were now 3, 4, 5 years ahead of me. And I would have felt like I was so behind, not going to college or anything like that.
The extra problem with that is that they also they wouldn't be able to relate to what you had experienced during that time. So that makes it doubly bad. You're behind at something awesome, and yet they don't have any appreciation necessarily of that. That would make it worse.
Or it could even culturally, it could even seem foolish, right? Mm-hmm. John's out there chasing this music dream. and we're out here getting married and starting families and starting careers. And uh, yeah, I remember times like going back home and not running and wanting to run into guys that I had graduated with because I didn't want to have to tell them the truth about how my life was sucking at that time.
Well, I appreciate the truthfulness of that, and it costs. Every time you do anything that's any kind of quest, if it's a quest worth being on at all, it's going to cost you. You have to invest effort. You have to. For me, it's the possibility of failing. That possibility. You may or may not succeed, and that's hard. But I think it's particularly difficult when you do it in something in a creative endeavor, because it can be labeled as looking foolish to the practical people out there. And but I get to the point where I'm like, I have to do this, or I'm going to spend the rest of my life wondering what it would have happened if I had tried. And at some point, even if you're like, there's a 1 in 10 chance of this happening, but I still have to do it because I got to look at myself.
And face the question of what would my life be without music if I wasn't making music, or in my case recording it or whatever. Do I want to live that life without music? And if the answer is no, then it's sort of easier to answer, well, what am I willing to sacrifice to pursue it? And you sacrifice a lot, you know. I know things could be said about similar other careers. Like I'm sure guys who pursue the medical field or whatever, they sacrifice a lot. There's something though about music, don't you think, Matt, that just it gets in your soul, and it's not going to come out right. You can't just release it. But goodness, I've met men over the years, young guys who lived with the regret of giving up when they did. And no one would ever say that was foolish for you to do that. Sometimes it was the right decision for them to make, but just a really sad decision to have to make.
Right. Absolutely. So that cost is definitely part of the equation, and it also makes it more sweet. And what you're saying about music, I really do believe it's special. I've worked in a lot of different media production and technology related communications, this and that. And I think you already know that my wife's a very talented singer, musician. And we've done a lot of ministry stuff over the years, a lot of where we help people do this or that, done a lot of videos. I love film. I want to do more and more of that. However, I have said more than once in the last 5-10 years, my suspicions are the music is going to last longer than any of the other stuff. It just once it's been produced and put out there, it has more chance of connecting with someone 5-10 years from now than most other things. It really is special. And so, and I said all the stuff that we've done over the years, I think Miriam playing and singing at people's weddings and funerals, even though they may not be the most satisfying thing in the moment, that's really special stuff for people, especially the funerals. Ooh. I mean, going to a funeral with bad music is just awful, because you're like, this person's life is being finished up with this. And when it's really beautiful music, it feels so much more right. So I didn't want to get so dark. I got way darker than I needed to get right there. But
well, but it does go down a good trail that maybe we can end this part with this little story. But I remember, Matt, when my mom was passing away, she was her last few days. She was in a nursing home. And I was in the room. She was sort of out of it, but a little lady knocked on the door, came in with a ukulele. Could I play your mom some songs? And I didn't know this lady. Of course, she didn't know I was in the music industry. And she asked my mom if she had any favorite hymns, which my mom didn't really respond. So I'm like, just play. I'm sure she'll enjoy whatever you play. And so she played some of her original songs. And now I could have put on my music industry hat and evaluated those songs for their commercial potential, and that would have gone nowhere. But to look in that moment as, wow, this woman is using the gifting that she's had to come in and not just bless my mom, but to bless me. And in a way, she kind of sung my mom into heaven, such a holy moment. And, I run into so many people, you probably do too, of just like the only real use of their music is to make some big living with it and to be a celebrity on some international stage. I don't, eternity will be interesting when it judges, when the awards get handed out. But it's hard for me to believe that that little lady that came in our room that day won't get a lot of stars in her crown, even though no one will ever know who she is, or she won't be recognized on any musical platform. But her choice to do that to serve people with the gifting that she had was powerful. And just about anybody can do something like that.
Yes. I'm a little torn because I want to share something with you, but when you're telling stories and then it feels like somebody is like upping the ante. Like,
no, that's fine.
We had a very similar experience. Miriam's been streaming on Twitch, and one of the evenings when she was doing it, a dear friend of ours was in the room with his entire family, and Miriam was singing songs. They were requesting them live, and she was singing songs to this friend of ours, and if I understand it correctly, she really did sing him in. And it was, and the thing was, it was awkward because you've got all these people on the chat talking to you from all over the world. They don't know this backstory. They don't know what's happening. And they're, making jokes and talking this. But in the midst of this just regular old stream, that happened. And it was really, really special. And music, I mean, friendship matters in that case as well, but that music can minister to people in ways that nothing else. So I think you and I are very much on the same page. Very important stuff.
It's just, for people who are listening, it's probably just important to say that they're facing a cultural definition of what it means to make to use your musical gifting, to do whatever. It's almost countercultural to think this way, but any use of your gifts to make the world more beautiful, better place with whomever is maybe exactly what you're supposed to do with the gifts you were given. And it sounds like that's what happened with Miriam that night.
Yes, you are well spoken, sir. One of the many reasons I wanted to talk with you. So I had something. One second. There's a message. Rob, I'm going to see if you can see this on the screen. I haven't read it all. Being able to sing someone. Oh yes, Dixie's mom talking about that whole process of helping people, and yes, it is wonderful.
Bless whoever that is that sent that message.
Well, I can tell you that Dixie's mom is Miriam's, my wife. She's my mother-in-law, and
awesome.
Her name is Dixie's mom because she has 5 kids and she wants to be fair. So Dixie is her dog. She can't play favorites here. No, but she is. I'm blessed to have a wonderful mother-in-law, and I'm not even doing that. I'm not even saying that to kiss up and get brownie points. It's everybody knows that it's true. So I want to switch gears a little bit. I think you and I are very much in alignment on how special music is and can be and should be and all that good stuff. I want to ask you about before and after when the music industry was no longer the music industry, when everything kind of shifted. I don't even know what years that was. I'm guessing it's late 90s. Is that fair? Somewhere in there? There were things
shifted
really,
in what way? Like away from
the digital world and how it, how everything changed, the way the industry might approach things, the economics. I always considered the old music industry, like the 70s and 80s, and the way the industry worked and worked with artists, that world doesn't exist anymore in the way I see it.
Mm-hmm.
And you lived through some sort of shift. And I guess what I'm asking, you can define what shift, when it was, your experience.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of setting up a general statement, but my question is, what I'd like to get to is what was better or best before the shift, and what was worse before the shift, and then what was better after the shift, and what was worse after the shift. It's a myriad set of questions around this transition in the industry, and I think you, of all people, are well positioned to comment on this. And I'm not fishing for anything other than I personally would love to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, I would put the shift at 1999, which is when Napster came along. And if any of your listeners, viewers know what Napster is, it was Sean Fanning who went on to work for Facebook and started the first music file sharing software. Excuse me. So he invented the technology where you could take a song, put it in your computer, and upload it to the internet, and then anybody could get on that network and download that file. Of course, what was bad before the shift was that if you liked a song, you had to buy an entire CD, sometimes for $20, in order to get that one song. So that was not a good way of delivering music to consumers, but it was just the way things were.
But it was good for the industry, though. They were making money because of that dynamic.
That's the good part. Yeah, we had no idea how good we had it, right? How much money there was in sales of CDs, and if I could, well, let me see if I can step this through. So 2000, 2001, 2002, those early years of the 2000s were us starting to live the results of this file sharing that was going on. I think largely the music industry ignored it at the beginning. They sued Napster and put them out of business, but then another one pops up, then LimeWire pops up, and then it's like playing whack-a-mole. And pretty soon you're discovering that if they're being honest, people are going online and downloading these files all the time. And when they do, of course, the label isn't getting paid. The songwriter and the artist aren't getting paid because there's no money being exchanged, right? So the bad part about the shift now has been the complete reorientation of how artists and songwriters and labels get paid for the music that they provide. It's a fraction of what it was before 2002, say. And anybody that reads the news that wants to investigate this can find there's been lobbying at Congress to try to get the numbers up to where they sort of used to be before streaming became the main method of consumption. But it's not even close still. And it's very difficult to be, especially a songwriter, in any format, whether it's hip hop, Christian, country, pop. All songwriters struggle, and there's so fewer songwriters that make a living now in any of those formats than there was prior to 2000. So that's all been bad. The good news, of course, of it now is, well, one, this amazing catalog of music that's out there just for us to be able to listen to. That's incredible, right? If you want to listen to oh my goodness, an old Judy Garland record, it's probably on Spotify or Apple Music somewhere. Whereas you could dream about songs before, but if it wasn't in your vinyl or CD collection, you couldn't listen to it. So that's been great. And it's been great to be able to reach the consumer more directly, to be able to, if we want to release 2 songs, we can. If we want to release 1 song, we can. And we have all these data points now where we can measure who the consumer is. This artist is, their main demographic is 18-year-old boys up to 25-year-old boys, and that's who we want to target. None of that was really possible before streaming came along. So as you set the question up, there's been good and bad about both things. It's probably important to say that that shift did decimate the music industry as we knew it for all the years up to 2000. And just in 2016, so 16 years it took to begin to rebuild and the actual revenue of the music industry start to take an upward turn instead of being in decline for 16 years. So
how
so
do
many
you
labels
measure that? What is the metric that says, okay, now it's on the back up? Where do those numbers come from?
Yeah, from the RIAA, the Recording Industry Association of America. They track all the revenue that comes through, and you can slice and dice that data
Sure.
all kinds of ways. But if you're a member of the RIAA, that information is available to you. But most people could look through a Billboard magazine or anything like that, and especially during that time, there was a lot of conversation about how long can the industry endure, how many years can we go losing revenue year after year like this. But you can actually see graphs. I'm sure you can see these online where in 2016, it bottomed out and began to curve back up. We're still in 2023, nowhere near where we were in 2000 in terms of total revenue for the entire music industry, recorded music industry. But we're on our way. And that's one of the exciting things about where we are right now is for the first time, people are starting to talk about what's next after streaming, but at least streaming is working in a way that's rebuilding the industry. And, it's a fantastic solution to the old problem of having to buy a whole CD. Credit Steve Jobs for the guy who started iTunes and was the first guy who had enough clout and power to be able to go to the labels and say, hey, this is the way people are going to be consuming music. If they want to buy one song and they can't, they're going to steal it somewhere. So he was the first guy to figure out iTunes and figure out a way for people to legally download a song at a time if they wanted to. And that eventually turned into what is now Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, services like Pandora, SiriusXM. All these, it's 0.000 something per stream, but you multiply songs over millions of streams and there's revenue to be made again now. And thank God for it. So I don't know how concise that was, but that I think was the good and the bad of the old guard and the good and the bad of the new.
So in the meetings that happened from 99, say, through 2010 that you participated in, were you one of the guys who were like missing the old days and how you knew it worked? Or were you one of the guys trying to help the dinosaurs understand, no, it's out of the barn, it's not coming back in?
That's funny you say that because I do remember the label I worked for in 2001 was owned by Zomba, and Zomba owned another label called Jive. Jive was where Britney Spears, NSYNC, and Backstreet Boys all were on Jive Records. Can you imagine the revenue they were making in the late 90s and in 2000? So they were the first ones that I heard talk about how much revenue they were starting to lose. And the guy who was president of Zomba, we were on a conference call together, and he didn't use your metaphor, but he said, guys, I think this toothpaste is out of the tube and we're not going to be able to put it back in. That's the first time I'd heard anyone say something like that, because up until then, and this is probably 2002, 2003, up until then, everything was about fighting the pirates, right? We're going to keep suing them, keep putting them out of business. And I'll tell you, Matt, a day I remember was our executive team meeting where there was a newspaper article out of Santa Clara, California, where a 55-year-old woman served 3 days in jail for downloading a watermarked file. She went on the internet and downloaded a song, and got caught. And as an
They
example,
they just picked her out and said, "You're going
and
down, lady. We're making an example out of you."
And I'm telling you, after that happened, that made some national news, and the social consciousness of record labels and the attitude toward them took a gigantic nosedive. All those rich guys who own record labels and all these people who work for them, if I want my free song, well, I've played for plenty of songs, I'm going to get my. So it's like the whole tone of the country changed toward this sort of free music idea and away from ever buying CDs or whatever format it might be. It's interesting, over the last 10 years, how vinyl has made such a raging comeback. It sort of caught the zeitgeist of what was hip and cool. And, I don't think we could have talked anybody into buying vinyl in 2000. And now there are 20 somethings with gigantic vinyl collections in their, listening room. But other than that, there's no real tangible format that's not digital these days. And it's hard to not say thank God for it, because it really did bring back the music industry in a time when we didn't think there was going to be any relief.
I have an observation. When you were talking through that, you were switching hats. You were commenting as somebody in the industry, and then you were commenting as someone who loves music. And you kind of switched them back and forth really, really fast. And it was interesting. And depending on which hat you had on, kind of flavored what it felt like when you were saying the thing. It was super honest, and I really appreciate that. Yeah. So
I'll tell you, Matt, real quickly, when it was at its height and the RIAA was going after these people, and sort of trying to make a public spectacle out of them, the president of our label at that time called us all together and like, hey, this is going on. Do not let any of this go to your house. You make sure your kids aren't doing this, your wife, your spouses, whoever. It would be a horrible thing for somebody who worked for a label to be caught downloading free music and actually pirating it. So I remember that day and thinking, I kind of hate it, because that's a great way to get music.
Once again, that's just honest all the way across the board. Yeah. And that guy was smart too, because he's absolutely right. Yeah. That would have been devastating. Of course, once again,
best embarrassing.
Yeah, but once again, toothpaste was out, so it wasn't going back in. Okay, so I am keenly aware that we only have a couple of minutes left. I want to blow through some stuff really fast. Apologies.
Sure.
You've worked with lots of artists over the years. I personally noticed when one of your artists won 2 Grammys in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
How many artists have you worked with who have won Grammys? Tell me about that, or tell me about that particular, that moment. Tell me about what you remember about it. I'm assuming that was very cool and fun and exciting.
That was Lauren, right? In 2019.
Yeah. You say was a song, and Look Up Child was an album. If I understand it correctly, those were 2 Grammys. Yeah. And that's you, right? I mean, it was obviously a team of people, but I mean,
well, sure.
Tell me about that. I mean, that's cool. I tell me more about that.
Well, I've been to the Grammys now. I've been doing the job so long. I've been to the Grammys a handful of times. And if you signed an artist that ends up winning a Grammy and worked on the record, there is, of course, I don't know that there's any more like sort of earthly satisfaction in something, but especially for them. And often this happens, and it was Lauren's story that year, where artists can just kind of catch a jet stream and almost nothing can go wrong, right? Like every song they puts out goes #1. Their fan base is growing by leaps and bounds. All their tours are selling out, and Lauren was having that kind of year. So I would never be so pretentious as like, of course we're going to win the Grammys. But it would almost been a disappointment that year had she not won what she was nominated for. And, it's such a joyful thing to get to celebrate that with them. And the Grammys are such a spectacle, and kind of becoming something that a lot of us aren't as proud of as we used to be. And a lot of the awards are changing. I do feel like there was a sense, I don't know how long ago, but it's changing. But the sense was that this is the industry voting for the best work that their peers have released in that year. And they've changed a lot of their guidelines. A lot of different people can vote for the Grammys now. It tends to not mean as much as it used to, but I would never deny that it's a great feeling when you've been associated with somebody winning a Grammy, and it should be, right? I mean, there's of course always the weirdness of, Lord, I don't ever want to be lose humility over something like this. But I want to stay grateful for any good thing that's going on because it's your hand at work. But at the same time, allow yourself to celebrate it, embrace the moment, and trust me, Matt, you know this, but in case anybody's listening that knows, those are such the exceptions, right? When they do catch that jet stream, it's almost like you don't have to do anything. You worked hard on the music, but now it's out there, and look, it's just getting all this attention.
It takes on its own life. It's got its own life, and that's the reason why I love music so much. Is that once it's there, and that's
amen. Yeah, but for every one of those, there's 15 things back at the label that you've worked 5 times as hard on and can't get any traction on. There's no encouragement for those people. They're just like digging a trench in the dirt with their hands and trying to put little songs in there. That's more the thing. So when you ask about how a Grammy feels, it feels like, oh, there's it's worth it. And you never know when this is going to happen for someone else. That record that Lauren won those Grammys for was a 4-year journey of lots of starts and stops and a lot of hard work. So you never want to not let yourself enjoy it. But at the same time, hopefully it only renews your focus on the things that aren't quite as lucky that you still need to work really hard on.
I remember getting a CD handed to me by an artist in Nashville who had worked long and hard to get that done, and we were in the liner notes, and I was like, "Wow, you must be thrilled!" And it was like, "I'm just tired." Back in the day when we used to go to Nashville, we'd go to Word Record, and you gave us stacks of CDs, and I still have a bunch of those somewhere. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, that's hilarious.
We weren't really we never really did buy CDs that much, but I did a job one time, or I went and bid on it. I didn't even get the job. I think we bid on a job for BMI. And it was a technology job. And so at the meeting, we walked in to meet these, and they handed these like 25, 30 CDs, like, you might want some of these. And out of that, I learned who John Hyatt was. I mean, there was 2 John Hyatt albums in there, and I'm like, wow. There's a lot of other really, really good stuff in there. But I mean, I just remember, we didn't buy a lot of CDs back in the day, but that was, you were one of our sources.
It would be interesting to anybody. Most of the artists that are on our label still want CDs pressed because they still sell them at their merch tables. And it's crazy. Like you're like, well, do you think the people buying the CDs have CD players? And most of the artists think they're good souvenirs, for one thing. They're easy to sign, and they're good for like bundles. Like you get 2 T-shirts and a poster and a CD for $25 or whatever. So we still manufacture CDs on almost every release. And if you go to our artist merch tables, there'll be CDs sitting there.
Back in the day, I was so proud when we first started doing multi-track recording. We had stacks of cassette decks, so we can mass produce our own, cassettes. And then we have a CD duplicator, stacks of those. And it's interesting. Yeah. We're working on a project right now. And this first time I've ever really worked on an album where I was like, we're not going to press CDs are. It's like really trying to figure out whether or not that makes sense or not, because it always is nice to have something tangible. And then anytime you do something like that and you stack them up and there's like 20 of them that look exactly the same, it just looked successful. I don't know why, but it was awesome.
Yeah.
So we did all this completely backwards. And I kind of did it on purpose. Eurocentricity, that's your label, right? Is that your baby? Are you like the original guy and you built it?
I started it, in fact, out of our house in this room right here. But I started it with a family in Seattle who funded it. So we have, outside funding, and that was I first met those people in 2002. So we're, going on 21 years now. And it's been certainly a long journey where we didn't make any money for a long time, and very grateful for that family who was patient and helped continue to support us. And we just had a new girl start yesterday, so she's not in there yet. I was employee number one, I guess you could say.
Well, when was that? How long has it been going on? The company?
Those conversations started in 2002.
Wow.
It was probably early 2004 before we actually released anything.
Well, you are definitely in the business. You are a delight to talk to, which I already knew.
Likewise.
But I think this is the longest conversation you and I have had. A while back, I called and asked for your opinion on a project that I think was outstanding, and confirmed what I thought I knew was the case, is that this is fantastic music and probably not all that marketable because of how things work. So
those are always tough.
Yeah, well, I knew it. I knew that was going to be. I knew that was going to be what you said, but I didn't want to assume. And I appreciate you being so gracious to listen and check things out. So I am honoring our time. Okay? So Music Quest, I hope to engage people with large record collections, artists, people who produce stuff, people who do music just because they love it, people who make a living at it. Music Quest, I really hope to engage a wide variety of people over time. And good. I would like to give you an opportunity to share maybe a thought or two, wisdom, if you will, to people who love music and will undoubtedly deal with the clashes of the mechanics, the business, and the art, and all of those things. That's a huge topic, but I have such faith in you that you can make some sort of comment that's worth listening to. I'm putting you on the spot. I didn't set you up for this at all.
That's okay. But I think you just used the word messy, and that is the word I use all the time for this idea of, at least in what I do, which, we have this faith-based label. So we're trying to combine things that don't go together at all, which is art making and business and faith. Goodness, what a messy proposition, and three areas that almost push against each other, trying to hold those together. So if I had any, any words of advice for anyone, it would probably take on two parts, but one regarding that is, I don't think there's any resolution to that, of the tension that is in those things. And even if you're not a Christian and you're just trying to make music and make a living at it, it's still a mess. And you're still constantly trying to trade off making a living with your artistic expression, to just get ready and embrace that, because it's not a problem to solve. I don't think you ever can solve it, but it is a tension to manage and embrace and live with that. So that sort of leads to this other idea which I think would apply to just about anybody. And it is a biblical reference. So apologies for that if that bugs anybody. But in Matthew 5, there's this parable of the talents, which is an interesting word to use because today it wasn't what we think of as talent today. But it's okay if we want to use the metaphor a little bit that this master comes to these three people and says, and gives them each some talent. And what philosophers think or what theologians think is that was actual money back then. But let's say for the purposes of this, that it was actual talent, gifting maybe. And he gives them these talents and then he leaves. So when he comes back to see what they had each done with them, there's this first guy who comes back to the master and says, I know you're a peculiar master. Look, I didn't want anything to happen with what you gave me. So look, I buried it. And now you've returned. Nothing has happened to it. I'm giving it back to you just like you gave it to me. I kind of get that guy, but that was not good news for that guy. It wasn't what the master was looking for. The other two guys or people were given some talents. They took them out into the field. They worked with them. They made more with it. They brought it back. I do like that in this story, there was one that was given less than the other. He brought back less than the other. Didn't seem to make any difference to the master. Both of them, well done. This is what I hoped you would do. Make more with what I gave you. So for us, is there something in there that is maybe just if you are a professional or an amateur or just dreaming of going on the music quest, are you thinking of, here are the gifts that I have. What can I do with those today? Is there something I could be doing with these? My gift for this or that, for words and melody, for playing the bass guitar, for writing lyrics, for being able to get up in front of a crowd and seem to be able to communicate things. Any of these giftings that I might have, what am I doing with them? And to answer that question, I think is a good roadmap for what you can be doing with your gifts. If anybody saw Chariots of Fire, which is an 80s movie, probably nobody that will ever see this saw that movie, but I recommend it. And I recommend it for one scene where the main character is wants to run in the Olympics. And he's the son of Chinese missionaries, or missionaries to China. And his sister is trying to convince him to give up the Olympics and come back to China to be a missionary. That's sort of the moral dilemma that's set up in the movie. But he says to his sister, yes, Jenny, my heart is made for China, but he also made me fast. And when I run, I feel his pleasure. I just love that line. And I love what it can mean to us as we explore our gifts and we ask ourselves the question, what am I doing today with the gifts he gave me? What can I do today? And then to use that sort of guideline as when I did this, I didn't feel anything. Nothing resonated. Nothing really, I didn't feel like any real good was done. But when I did this over here, I felt his pleasure. I felt something that is the right thing to be doing at the right time with the gifts that he's given me. And for anybody who's experienced this, I don't need to say anything else. You know how gratifying that is in your soul. Like, I've been given this, I'm returning it in a way that's making the world a better place, or at least changing this person's life, making their world better. And if there's any higher use of music than that, I don't know what it is. So maybe you go through your day, your week, your year, asking yourself, what am I doing with what he gave me? And then as you answer that question, find out where you feel his pleasure and go from there.
Beautiful.
Good.
And the thing about it is that even though this is Music Quest, I hope that it's just blatantly obvious to people that the conversations, the interests, the engagement, all of that stuff translates to all kinds of things where you talked in a broader sense of talent. So yeah, music, yes, but that translates to everything where you give back with what you've been given. And so I hope that is just clear as we move forward and talk about our quests and the fun parts and all that kind of stuff. So John, it is an hour. We are going to keep it an hour. I hope this was not overly painful. I know that you beforehand you said you were at a restaurant and had to scream over a bunch of stuff and you lent your voice.
I'm sorry for the way my voice sounds.
Oh no, it's fine. But I would like to put the thought out there that maybe sometime in the future we do this again and maybe pick a topic more up front. I hope it was enjoyable enough that you might consider that. And I know that
anytime.
I've got one last comment from my mother-in-law. You ready?
Yeah, let's do
it.
There
you go.
Amen. I like your mother-in-law.
Yeah, well, you'd be a horrible person if you didn't.
Okay.
So thank you so much, John. I appreciate it. I hope you have a fantastic day. I'll get this cleaned up and eventually it'll be posted. I'll send you a link when that happens. And thank you so much. And I'm going to go ahead and call this good. And we'll check everybody next time. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Matt.